Hello, folks. I'd like to speak for a minute about email and identity and just some basic rules for how you need to use emails in your customer data. I don't think I'm going to tell you anything that you don't already know, but I think this framework is very important to keep in mind as you try to resolve the identity of visitors to your websites. Now, mostly I'm talking in the context of a customer data platform, but it doesn't have to be a customer data platform. It's any situation where you're trying to resolve identity between people on your website and data you have in other sources, like your fulfillment system or your store or your email system, anything like that. So once again, I'm going to talk in the context of a customer data platform. In a customer data platform, an email has two basic functions. The first is to establish identity and to merge records of the same person who's might be using a different computer, might be using his desktop and his cell phone, or his work computer and his home computer, right? So you need to merge those records. You might also have records that you've imported from some other system. So for example, if I, Greg Crable, go to a website and I haven't told them anything about myself, if they have a customer data platform, they're going to create a profile for me, and it's going to be an anonymous profile. And I'll go through the site and I'll search for this and that, and I'll record that information in my profile. Well, let's say this is a company that I've done business with. Let's say it's Maryland Homebrew, and I've purchased some homebrew supplies from Maryland Homebrew. Now they have their point of sale system has a record for me from the times I've gone into the store and purchased malt and hops and yeast. But they don't know that that's me online, right? I come to the website and I'm searching for Bavarian hops. And they don't know that that record that they have for this anonymous visitor online is the same as the record they have in their point of sale. So the email address is the best way to merge those two things. I'll talk a little more about that. The other function of an email is to orchestrate campaigns. So for example, let's say that eventually Maryland Homebrew does recognize that this person who has this profile property visiting the website is also Greg Crable, who comes into the store and buys X, Y, and Z. Now they've linked my email address, which is in the point of sale system, to my web activity. So then if I come to the site and I'm searching for a particular kind of hop and it's out of stock, then when it comes back in stock, they can send me an email saying, hey, and we noticed you were looking for this hop. Sorry, we didn't have it. We've got it now, right? So those are the two basic functions of an email address in a CDP. Now, the question is, how does an email address actually establish identity? Because there's all kinds of email addresses in the world, right? The threshold question is whether this email address corresponds to a living, breathing person. Mickey@disney.com is not a valid email address, right? So we infer, now there are some assumptions here, but it's a fairly safe bet. We infer a person is on the other side of an email address if they take actions from that email. If we send them an email and they click on the link and we can link those two actions, then okay, there's somebody there, right? Or if we send them an email with a code and they enter that code, we know they're there. So, and this is the similar kind of thing you get with two-step authentication when people text you and you have to type in a number. So mobile phones do a similar thing. Now, there's a many-to-one relationship here. One person has many email addresses. Now, generally speaking, we can safely ignore the opposite situation where one email address has many people. There are such situations, right? A customer service inbox or a family email address or whatever. I have some friends who maintain a family email address and you don't know who you're talking to when you send to that email address. So there are situations like that, but I think for most use cases, you can safely ignore that. Generally speaking, you're more concerned with one person having multiple email addresses. And people have, they have a work email address, a home email address, a junk email address. I think I have 80 email addresses. I'm not even sure. And they change. right? If you decide that you're sick of Gmail and you go use Proton Mail, now you have a new email address. Or you change your job. Or you haven't changed your job, but the job changes the structure of the email address. So it's not first initial last name at company.com. It's first name dot last name at company.com, right? So email addresses change over time. Now, if you want to establish the identity of an individual, you need to get all their email addresses and merge them all into one profile. But there are situations where simply saying this person has an email address, that's good enough for us. Like, for example, I don't think that Spotify, I'm using Spotify an example, but you could use any number of other examples where the company really doesn't care if you have 5 email addresses and have 5 different accounts. It just doesn't matter. So in those cases, they make email address a unique record, right? Only one email address per account, and that email address identifies that account. And that's fine for some use cases. It's also fine in situations where precise identity doesn't matter that much. So let's say you have an email address that you're not sure if it's a good email address or a bad email address, but the person whose profile has this email address in it is looking at a bunch of articles about retirement. So you send them an email saying, hey, do you want our retirement newsletter? Okay, it's not really the end of the world if you got that not exactly right. But let's talk for a minute about this idea of merging the record. You have an email address that you've gained in whatever way, and you have, remember the Maryland Homebrew example, you have the email address in one system, in your email system, in your point of sale, but you haven't yet attached that to web behavior. And that's your real goal, is to attach those two things together so that you can treat a person rather than a profile. So if you have that goal to identify a person rather than an account, you have to accommodate this many-to-one relationship and store multiple email addresses for each person. And that would mean, in the context of a customer data platform, you need to have multiple email addresses in any given profile. But there are different types of email. They come in different sorts. Some are good, some are bad, and the ways you collect them are different. So a user-entered email is generally reliable, but there's a lot of Mickey@Disney.com, right? An account email, so think of the Maryland Homebrew example. I have an email address on my account with the lovely people at Maryland Homebrew, but unless they've linked that to an online profile, it hasn't done much good. Basically, I have 2 profiles. I have the account, the profile that has my account information. And then I have this other profile that has my web activity. The goal is to merge those two. And the way you merge those two is get the person on the web to enter the email address that corresponds with the account, and then you can merge those 2 records. You also have deliverable and non-deliverable emails, right? And you have inferred email. I'll talk about that more in a minute. And then you have best email. So this would be something where you might want to use some machine learning to find out, okay, this person has 5 different email addresses. They're most likely to reply on this address and not the others. So inferring emails, let's say that I send out an email and I put a link to it. And the link goes to this website, and I put in that question mark ID equals 5237. Now let's just say that I'm using an email system that has a record like this. Record number 5237 has this email address attached to it. So I send a person an email with that link in it. They click on that link, and I say, aha, or I send that email to greg@crablegroup.com, right? Whoever receives that email clicks on that link, and I say, aha, it's you. I gotcha. And then I take greg@crablegroup.com, I do a lookup against my email system, and I say, greg@crablegroup.com, add that to the online profile. Sounds wonderful, right? But what if what if the email was forwarded? Or what if that link was shared on Twitter or Facebook? See, now you're putting greg@crablegroup.com in all these other profiles where that doesn't belong. So without some other way to confirm that, inferring emails is not reliable. It may be good enough for some use cases, as I mentioned before, there are situations where you don't have to establish identity perfectly, right? That's fine. Just realize that for establishing identity, for saying, I'm going to match Greg at crablegroup.com with this record that I have in my point of sale, or this record that I have in my backend fulfillment system. No, not with this email address, because it's not clear enough. So the bottom line is the bare minimum is you have to have two different types of email addresses. You need your unverified email address, which you can use for prospecting or various things. But then the verified email address is what you want to merge your records on. And that's when you establish, okay, this is a verified email. I know this email corresponds to a person. I know it corresponds to one person, within a certain range of reasonable doubt. And then you merge the records based on that. So let me give you an example of how that would work. I've been buying from Maryland Homebrew for 25 years, and they have my email address. And generally speaking, I like to go to the store because I like to talk to the manager and so forth. And then I go online and I place an order. I place an online order where I have to enter my email address. Now, that cookie that was on my web browser that identified me as an anonymous person, now it has that email address attached to it. Now they can take that email address and the email address in point of sale, merge the two, and say, aha, we know who you are now. You've identified yourself. We're going to merge those two records. The record that we got from point of sale, the record maybe from the email system, plus the record of the online activity. You might also do that if someone signs up for an email newsletter. Now here, it's possible somebody's going to enter a bad email address, but I think it's fairly, none of these things are as deterministic as people would like them to be. There's always some room for reasonable doubt or unreasonable doubt. But what you want to do is the way that you collect the email address, you want to have in your mind, can I be certain that this is one person or this is a valid email address? And if so, I put that in my verified email address profile in a property, in a field, however you store it in your CDP, and then use that to merge your records. So I hope that was helpful. And as again, I said, I don't think any of this is new. You've probably all thought of all these things, but I hope putting them all together in this kind of format helps clarify how you need to think about emails as you're using them to establish identity in online systems. And if you have any questions, contact me. You can reach me at crablegroup.com. Thanks.